So we're back. I don't know what week it is now. I'm out of touch, but the front plate of this video, when it goes up, will have the right direction on it. But I haven't prepared a lesson today on purpose. I didn't prepare a lesson, and I think it's because I had an insight, and I realized that people get tired of lessons. They get tired of the learning. They get tired of the expectation, the unspoken expectation that I've got something new to learn. I've got something new to become. I've got something new to attain. I've got something new to change. I've got something new to fix. And we become overwhelmed. And then we physically disappear when we feel that we can't fully be present in what's being asked of us to go to a place. I mean, we all know what this feeling feels like when we make arrangements to connect or meet with people. And then the day comes that we're supposed to be there, and we didn't realize, but it was one of those days where we don't have a lot in us. We're on empty. And it was Ideal Self that wrote the check, and now it's us that has to cash it, and we've got nothing in the bank. And we've got so many other bills to pay with that emotional budget that we have that we just can't come. Now, as we grow and change, we're able to predict that with a bit better certainty, and we're also able to ride the whole roller coaster a bit differently. But when you're in a love relationship with other people or a love relationship with yourself, you don't always choose the costs that you have to pay just to be in that love relationship and what the moment's asked of you. So it's like being a parent where you've got a budget for the month, and then the next thing your kids come along and there's just chaos and they've lost something and they need a new one, or they broke, and these emergency expenses come out of nowhere and you've got to pay for them out of love. And it's exactly the same with our emotional resilience and our psychological energy. It's not that we were fools when we made arrangements. It's that we had every good intention to step up and be somewhere and show up in a certain way. And then the day comes and we just can't. We just can't. And sometimes if we're really unkind to ourselves, we force ourselves to do that. And we've actually, all of us on this call have been in situations where we've been forced to neglect our inner child and neglect our need for rest and convalescence, and to make ourselves present and available to other people and to situations. And you keep doing that for a long time, and you get exactly the problem that Dimpna has been asking me to address on here, which is this sense of self-neglect of the inner child that we experience when we ask ourselves to pitch up and show up. And because we're saying how we appear and that we appear is more important than how we feel, and more important than our own needs to withdraw. And this insight came to me last night, actually. Young Dimps. This insight came to me last night, actually, realizing that I'm in my winter. And, you know, when we first started making these calls, it seemed like a bit of a joke. And, oh, no, it's not affecting me at all. But I don't know about you all, but around this time of new moon, I'm depleted. I really am. I'm depleted. I've given a lot. And my brain is racing, trying to solve problems. And I actually have to stop myself and say, no more problem solving now. No more problems. I have to remind myself, maybe like a dozen times a minute. Stop, especially when I'm trying to go to sleep. Stop. Stop trying to solve the problem. There's no problem to solve right now. Not now. Let it go now. Let it go now. Again and again and again and again and again. And it just seems incessant until we entrain to better habits. Now, I've come back from just the most incredible experience, which I wanted to share some of with all of you. But what I've decided to do, and I think it will be warmly received, and I'm going to let everybody know this, is that every 4 weeks, there's not going to be no lesson, no learning, no more doing. We're just going to come to ground and come to stillness and just be present. And we're just going to do something that would have looked like a sermon, maybe when we were kids. But there's going to be no fire, no brimstone, no Jesus. We're just gonna have a kind of conversation, and we're going to enter into a different kind of conversation with how we can deepen the conversation in our life, how we can deepen the conversation with ourselves, how we can open the doors so that we can be really kind and really good friends to ourselves again, and how we can put down the work for a moment and remind ourselves what this time of the lunar month is actually for. It's for rest. It's for stopping. It's for allowing. There's a beautiful there's two beautiful metaphors that I want to share with you from my trip. The one was someone was speaking one day and saying, "Oh, we're trying to rehabilitate. We've just moved to a new piece of land. We've moved away from the coast in Vermont, and we've moved up towards the mountains. And we're trying to rewild our property, rewild. And what rewilding is it's where you reconfigure the land for the way that either it was or the way that nature wants to have it now." And in this idea of rewilding, isn't this the most beautiful idea? The advice in year one, guess what you have to do for year one of rewilding? Do nothing. That's exactly right. Do nothing. Let everything alone. Let everything alone. Do nothing. And just watch and wait. And you can't watch and wait with the urgency that's leaning over, like a parent trying to make sure the child colors in the lines. You just have to leave the whole thing alone and just be. And just be in the land. Just allow everything, allowing. And if you're not sure, in the second year, you leave everything alone. And then you start deciding maybe where to pull down a wall, maybe where to move a rock, or to move back something that was taken away, or to pull out a plant that maybe isn't harmonious with the other stuff around it. And I just thought to myself, oh my God, what a wonderful idea. I'm so busy always in my project, especially me, leaning forward, carrying other souls, wondering about how I'm going to help this person fix this, fix that. I've got stuff in my marriage, stuff with Maya, stuff with my own work, stuff with the projects. I'm putting websites. I'm always tinkering, and it's fulfilling, but it's also quite exhausting. And it's exhausting in a way that doesn't show on the energy meter. It's exhausting in a way that slowly starts saying to my soul, nothing is good enough. Nothing's ever going to be good enough. And the thing is, the best thing that humans can do for nature is just to step away, just to leave it alone. And so that's an idea we're going to talk about today called rewilding. The idea of leaving everything alone and just letting it be. And the second idea was where I was in North Clare, in the southwest part of Ireland. Very beautiful country, very moving experience. And there's a geological place called the Burren, and I might show some photos to you so we can look at it as we talk. I'm just going to share my screen. You can watch me struggle through finding the right photo. So this was the cottage I was staying at over there, and that was the view from the cottage. So you can't see it super clearly, but there's a cow pasture here, and there's a main road that these people are walking on. And on the right, up here, is towards the pub, and then down here is towards the stone pier that sticks out into Galway Bay. And then just over here, there's a right turn that goes around here and then around the corner and off up the side of the inlet of the bay. And here, what you can see is cottage number 7. There's cottage 5, 6, 7, and 8, and then there's another person's cottage over here. And then all of the guests were staying, all the people that came on the tour were staying somewhere up and down this road. And these stone walls, this is a one that's got cement and stuff on it, but the stone walls actually look like that more often than not. They're just these bits of limestone that are tipped, and they're so jagged and rough that they stick to each other. And you can see here's a limestone wall, and here's a limestone wall, and here's a limestone wall. There's absolutely hundreds of these things everywhere. There you can see one of the first days we were gathered for a walk. These limestone walls, they line everything. And this geological feature you see over here is called the Burren. And what it is, the Burren is, it's actually Mediterranean Ocean with small, the Cretaceous period was where all these millions and millions, 4 million of years of little sea creatures left their shells and their exoskeletons at the bottom of the ocean. And the ocean leached everything out of it except just what would later become the limestone. And this gets compressed over millions of years. And eventually, via tectonic movement, the Mediterranean island shifted and merged with another piece of land, and that became the country of Ireland. And then upheaval of forces of the two plates crushing together lifted these things up. And what you're seeing is the geological uplift of what used to be in the Mediterranean of millions of sea creatures that have now become rock and have now become worn down and broken up into these pieces and built into walls. Now, the place called the Burren, aside from the roads, which there are few, climbing up into these, there's no mechanized equipment and no vehicles. Everything is done by hand, still today. Everything is done by hand. And what you get, can see if I can find a better picture. That's on top of the Burren. Things look like this. It's all this overgrown turf, these stone walls, and then these weathered hawthorn. Now, this is in the lowland still, and I'll see if I can find one in the uplands. This would have been... So here we're in the uplands now. We're quite high up. And you can see what this hawthorn is doing. It's absolutely smashed by the wind because the wind blows in one direction incessantly and doesn't stop, and hasn't stopped for thousands of years. So it just blows. And this turf that you're seeing, so there's just a little dandelion, but this turf that you're seeing, it's unique. It's the only place in the world where you get 3 kind of flowers that live together in the same pasture land: Mediterranean, Alpine, and Arctic. Only place in the world. So the Alps are where Germany, Italy, and Austria are. The Mediterranean is obviously where Italy, southern Italy, Greece, southern Spain, everything is, North Africa. And Arctic is in the Arctic Circle. And you get all 3 of the flowers growing here because of bird migrations and because of the 2 tectonic shifts that happened. And what you're looking at here, when I showed you that picture atop the hill, you're looking at this limestone Burren. And on top, let me see if I can find a good picture. Just bear with me. There. So this on top, this gate actually is a gate to a place that they call the winterage. It's another cool word, winterage. And what it is, every other agricultural tradition, especially when there's herding and cattle and sheep involved, what they'll do is they'll take the cattle down the valley in the winter and keep them with hay and everything, so they can feed and survive. But they do exactly the opposite in this part of the world on this feature called the Burren. They drive the cattle up here and they leave this to grow the whole year. And so this is all cut short now because it was springtime. And the reason it's cut short is because the sheep and the goats and everything have been up over everything and trimmed everything short. But during the year, they'll let this grow. They'll just leave it alone. And it completely rehabilitates. And the grasses are so tall, they would come up to the men's crotches. That's how tall the grass would be. And all these, aside from the three kinds of flowers, you also get botanicals, other kinds of plants from the Mediterranean, the Alpine, and the Arctic. And they make this so rich, and the limestone water feeds it. And it's so rich that when the cattle feed off this, all the cattle, a lot of cattle and sheep in Ireland get fed here in their spring and in the winter. And then they get sent off to be raised into milk cows or meat sheep or something like that somewhere else. But they get fattened here because also the calcium in the bones strengthens the animals. But this feature is called the winterage. And it's a place of nourishment, even if it's harsh and exposed, that you drive the cattle into once a year, that you let overgrow into a place that you've allowed to rewild over a whole season, over a whole year. And so you've got these two beautiful ideas of rewilding and a winterage, a place of great nourishment you can come to later. And the place of great nourishment is on top of this ancient, exposed, used to be at the bottom of an ocean, made from sea creatures, all of the stacked blessings of that place and the mystery of those two parts of the island that came together. It's enormous, the amounts of blessings and gifts that have conspired to come together to make this possible exactly the way it is. And these people they have not mechanized or automated the way that they do this. They've just done a more advanced way of what would have been done 100 years, 500 years, 1,000 years, 2,000 years. Up to 5,000 or 8,000 years ago, they were still doing much the same thing. It's fascinating. Fascinating. And so we're invited in our season of tiredness, of depletion, of needing rest, to first of all have an ear open to that conversation and to make it normal, to not live your life as if you're climbing a steep curve all the time, always trying to crush it, always trying to grow, always trying to develop. Hey, Jen, nice to see you. We're also mindful that the reason that these people could live here inhabited for so many thousands of years so successfully in such seemingly inhospitable condition was because they followed a seasonality. They first of all allow rewilding to happen, this idea where you let things alone for a year and just let nature do its work. And of course, the beautiful thing is all the animal droppings fertilize the sod and the turf, and the rain and the constant wind blows everything around. So it's this perfect, you can't create fertilizer better than this if you tried. And it's all natural, all natural. And the second thing is this winterage, this idea of letting a place that you've allowed to rewild to just be itself, to come back into for nourishment and for sustaining yourself in a way. And also this idea of herding, because they herd the cattle up here and they build these stone walls everywhere. And so the farmers, every single stone wall you see here, farmers would have built by hand, every single one. And if I show you another photo, you'll see that there's miles upon miles upon miles upon miles of these walls where every single stone laid was laid by a farmer. I don't have a really good photo of that, of a good view where you can see all these walls everywhere. I'm a little bit disorientated with all of this still, I think. Anyway, But this beautiful idea of the winterage, and this question we can ask ourselves actually is, what parts of ourselves can we allow to rewild? Can we stop prodding and tinkering and pushing and goading into service and more? And this mindset is part of the illness that we are suffering from. There's nothing necessarily wrong with us. We like to tell ourselves that. We like to tell ourselves that I have to fix myself and I have to fix this and I have to do this and I have to improve this. But this all presupposes or lives on the assumption that there's something wrong with me. And sometimes there's nothing wrong with you. Sometimes you've simply tried to take too much out of the land than the land can sustain. Sometimes you've been involved with the garden or the piece of turf or your pasture, and you've just been too close to it, trying to improve things. And sometimes the best thing, obviously, as we've learned with this concept of rewilding, is to leave things alone. Just leave things alone. And trust to leave things alone. And this is really where our intention and our stance comes along. What is our intention and our stance? We want to grow and we want to heal. But the other thing we want to do, which we don't even permit ourselves to say out loud because we haven't made space for the idea, is we want our vitality back. And the Mojo Dojo is not the healing dojo or the growth dojo or the learning dojo. It's the Mojo Dojo. Mojo is this ancient word for mana, for energy, for vital life force, for this libido that lives inside of all of us that we need to allow to rewild. And we need to herd different parts of our psychology back into these places that we've put aside so that we can become nourished again. Now, I wrote a small poem about the Burren, which I'm going to read to you so that you can share the experience that I had traipsing around that place. The Burren. The soil and the rocks of a place define the angle of repose. The soil and the rocks of a place define the angle of repose. Let me see if I can find that beautiful picture of Patrick McCormick in regal repose. This was a wonderful man called Patrick McCormick. He's a farmer. He walks this land. He would have built many of these walls with his own hands. That's a freshly cut green hazel stick. And all the rest of us are kitted out in expensive hiking equipment. And he's wearing farm shoes, jeans, and a sweater. And we've got 5 layers of clothing on. And he's just buckling around. He's also walking the most impossible terrain because the whole limestone cast that you're walking on is pockmarked and it's got these fissures and crevices from all the weathering. And actually, those fissures are so deep you can fall into. And if you don't mind yourself. And he does this 3 times a week. And we were up there for 7 hours walking. And I was sore the next day. And this guy does it effortlessly. And you can see the angle of repose. You can see the tree bent here in the back, the way the wind is blowing. And you can see these walls that they've built by hand. And he would just walk up to a place where he's standing here now. He literally ripped a bit of the wall down in seconds so we could all pass over. And then he knew where the hole was, and he knew he would be up 3 or 4 days later to come and repair the hole in the wall. And all of these walls are moved, and gates are made, and stiles are made, all by hand. And you can see the angle at which he's standing, and he's facing right into the Arctic wind. And there's a bit of blue sky. There's a saying that they use in Ireland, enough blue sky to make a sailor's shirt from. And I wanted to show you how he greets the land, the angle he stands at, and the angle that the wind is forcing on everyone. Look at that. The Burren, the soil and rocks of a place define the angle of repose. and the angle at which the land greets water and sky, and just so the angle at which everything greets everything else. To attempt to force a belonging, we are attempting to forge the signature of a place. We're attempting to forge the signature of a place and bound to feel immediately like a fraud, waiting to be discovered, rather than feeling how it is to be here, without the comfort of names, allowing the genius of the place to relay its secret, allowing yourself to be what is written on, which is always a map to something treasured and undiscovered deep inside the weathered ancient landscape, deep inside yourself. The Burren. The soil and rocks of a place define the angle of a place. We are made up of soil and rocks of our bodies. We've got water in our bodies, we've got breath in our bodies, and we try and greet the world in a certain way, and we try to show up in a certain way. And we try force a belonging into every moment. We try force a belonging into our lives. We try force a belonging into our grief. And to try and force a belonging, you don't know how to walk that land. We're attempting to forge a signature and pretend to belong. And we feel immediately like inauthentic and an imposter in our own efforts. Rather than just letting things alone and letting ourselves alone in that place, so that's this thing that's leaning forward can maybe disappear for a moment. And we can just be there. And stop trying to name things, stop trying to name our emotions, stop trying to name the solution, the problem, just be in that place, in that moment, and let ourselves ease into that conversation and become part of the conversation. And it's a conversation. And the invitation is always happening. The invitation is even right here, right now, to ease into that conversation. And let the moment, the place, even the place of your body, relay its own secret, its own genius, the genius that guides the hand of rewilding. And instead of you trying to write something onto the moment, let yourself be what is written on too. And it's always a map. And it shows the way to something treasured and undiscovered deep inside yourself. This ancient weathered landscape, this generation after generation of wall building that evolution has done inside of us and our psychological adaptation has done inside of us. The Burren. The soil and rocks of a place define the angle of repose and the angle at which the land greets water and sky, and just so, the angle at which everything greets everything else. To attempt to force a belonging, we are attempting to forge the signature of a place, and bound to feel immediately like a fraud, waiting to be discovered, rather than feeling how it is to be here, without the comfort of names, rather than feeling how it is to be here, without the comfort of names, allowing the genius of the place to relay its secret, allowing yourself to be what is written on, which is always a map to something treasured and undiscovered, deep inside the weathered ancient landscape, deep inside yourself. We don't make space for silence. We don't make space for stillness. We're always so certain about what we ought to be doing, how we ought to show up, what a thing is, what we are in that thing, what our place is. And we overstep so often. And in the feeling like a fraud, and in the not knowing how to have a conversation that we're not really listening out for, We feel that nervous discomfort in our bodies and anxiety, depression, deep sadness. It doesn't mean something is wrong that we can fix. It means that our bodies, our inner child, does not know how to belong to the moment. Like when you take a child and you force them across the room to go play with another child. The most awkward fucking feeling in the universe. We all remember our parents. Just go talk to them. And you don't want to. And we make ourselves do that all the time. Instead of just allowing silence, allowing stillness, allowing ourselves to show up imperfectly, allowing ourselves even to disappear. And we're afraid, some part of us is afraid that we're going to disappear into that silence. And yet, it's exactly in that silence, in that stillness, that you can hear for the first time the invitation to the conversation. Now, I'm letting you all know right now, I was so inspired by this trip that I've decided this is what I want to do with my life. I don't want to teach people anymore. I want to initiate people back into the moment, back into the silence, back into this knowing. I want to start running non-religious sermons, just like this one. Because this is the nourishment that we actually all need. This. There's time for lessons. The world is full of lessons. But this is the nourishment that we actually all need. This is the thing that we were looking for inside of religion that we couldn't find there because they had too many man-made walls that weren't built carefully by hand, that weren't built from loose stone that was already there, that didn't have respect for the land that's inside of us. You know, I went there very much Rocco. And what I'm explaining to you about wilding and winterage and letting things alone, guess what lesson had to come to me? Have a guess. I'm so close to the edge all the time, and I always feel responsible for moving the things, steering people, steering myself, fetching the thing so I can become, so I can do the very humbling lesson for me. And not one that anyone taught me. It's just one that eventually I had to wake up to. I had to discover again the conversation and realize that I've been having it wrong, even with the best of intentions. Even with the best of intentions. And your intention is important and your stance is important. But you have to make space in both of those for listening, for stopping, and for not knowing that you know what to do and you know how this should play out and you know how this should be. And for silence and for smiling. I wrote this as the understanding started dawning on me. It said, I think there's a lovely story here as well, actually. There's a very strange painting that was above one of the cottages, the fireplaces in the cottages. I'll show that to you now, actually. It says, "Be not so quick." Now, this was a fox painting just above the fireplace in cottage number 8, where we had our dinner one night. And it says, "Be not so quick and certain to be your full accomplished self. For however is the greater version of you to arrive and take up residence if all the seats are taken, and all the spaces and silences filled with who you already are and what you believe you already know. Even me, even me. Even me, I'm going to ask you all a question and I want you to write it down. And I reflected on this question last night and I realized that I've done an impressive amount of work and I've covered an impressive amount of ground. And, you know, by definition, all growth that we encounter, all growth requires an outgrowing of who you have already become. Like a crab leaving a shell. By definition, all real growth requires an outgrowing of who you have already become. Even if what you have already become was earned at great cost. To grow, means you have to outgrow who you have already become. Outgrow, which means there's more maturing that can happen. And the maturing isn't always standing up bigger and bolder and badder. Sometimes it's this humbling that I had to learn. I had to outgrow who I had already become. I was too much in one direction, too powerful, too strong, too loud, too present, too full of it, too knowing. And the thing is, I wasn't fucking around. I didn't arrive at all of those things by foolishness or by childishness or by slacking off. Like, I know a few things about a few things, but still, there's a limit to that. And there's a limit to how much that can add value into your life, even that certainty and that confidence. And the thought in this little, very short quote or micro poem or whatever is it's about confidence. And specifically, how even genuine confidence, because I'm not bluffing, it's how our genuine confidence can actually still work against us. How your genuine confidence can actually work against you. Think about jujitsu for a moment. How can you learn if you are just confident in what you know and you're not really open to what you're encountering? And now, especially if you're committed to growth, your confidence can work against you. And if you've landed like I have in a hard-earned certainty from having really done the work, your confidence can especially work against you over there. We naturally encounter this in a truly forgivable sense that we've arrived finally after a very difficult journey. And there's this sense of, understandable sense of deserving the place that you're standing in, like a black belt, like a place in your relationship, like a place in your growth or your understanding or your accomplishment. And of course, we're unwilling to take this person, this whole identity we've developed under great effort and pain, and throw it back on the sacrificial fire of starting again. You know, there was a Greek poet called Archilochus. He had a story about the fox, very short story, a little parable, just a little phrase. And the punchline of this was the fox knows many things, but the hedgehog knows only one great thing. What does that mean? The fox is cunning and sly and clever, and it's got tricks and it's got plans and schemes. And the hedgehog has none of those. The hedgehog, when it gets confronted, when it doesn't know what to do, just rolls into a ball. And the hedgehog beats the fox every time, just with that simplicity, just with not knowing. Be not so quick and certain to be your full accomplished self. For however is the greater version of you to arrive and take up residence if all the seats are taken, and all spaces and silences filled with who you already are and what you believe you already know. Which means that is actually an invitation to disappearance. It's an invitation to when life or the conversation seems to be breaking us down and cracking us open and revealing. Vulnerability then is the key to growth. Discomfort then is the key to growth, because discomfort means you are in unfamiliar place, being pushed in ways that you do not have answers for. And instead of feeling like something is wrong, this is the sign that something is terribly right. Now, how quickly can you choose a stance of allowing and open that door or that gateway or that style? There's a beautiful metaphor here I discovered. Let me see if I can find a picture for you. In between all these stone walls, in between these fields of movement and ways of being, there's these styles, stile, and it's a little threshold, a little foot place, and then these limestone uprights that form this tiny gate. Now that would have, I could barely fit my foot sideways on that thing, which means your foot has to face forward, but your body has to sort of turn sideways. You have to pivot in a way to squeeze past you, because that will take me like up to my upper thighs. So I can't walk through straight. There's no bold stepping through. There's no bold stepping through. That little stile becomes a tiny temple in the wall that asks you to let go of your boldness and your certainty, and you have to turn sideways and kind of let go how you want to face things. The question I wanted to ask you all is, today is May 2023. 7 years ago would have been 2016. Where were you in 2016? Where were you in spring of 2016? Who were you? Write this question down in your book. What would me from 7 years ago think of the woman or of the man that I have become today? What would me from 7 years ago think of the woman or of the man that I have become today? And just sit with that for a minute. I was 41. It sometimes helps to work out how old you were. I was 41. And I know that my life really began when I was 42, 43, when I got divorced. What felt like an ending was actually just a beginning, a necessary ending. How much kinder are you now to yourself and other people? How much have you learned? How much have you grown? How much wiser are you now than what you were? What has been the project of your life between then and now? Imagine sitting that version of you from 7 years ago down and having a coffee and let them ask questions and say, who are we? What have we done? What have we accomplished? What do we hold in our hearts now? What was their dreams and expectations from life? What were they trying to do to be? All of the outward things that we were chasing made fools of us. Never happened. But all of the secret things that we wanted all along, we've found a way of getting there or moving closer. Now that's a question I think you can sit with here in your winter. We're all in our winter now, in our lunar winter. And there's difficult energy moving through the world at the moment. I don't know if you've noticed it. Difficult times. Lots of thoughts of childhood and trauma and flashbacks coming up. Things that happened to you in past relationships just stabbing at you out of nowhere. And the invitation is not to solve the problem or to wonder about questions and answers. The only thing that's left to do there is what I call soul retrieval. There's little packets of yourself, of your vitality, of your mojo that got strewn around like these stones dropped all around the place. And they got locked and left and grown over as you walked away because you believed you needed to walk away. You needed to be someone else or stand differently, or you just cauterized those little pieces of you in your hurry, in your rush to belong to the moment, belong to a situation, to be something, to be what other people needed you to be what you thought you expected from yourself. And the opportunity actually is to collect all these things and just hug them back to us with no judgment, no story. Just welcome home, welcome home, welcome home. So that we can make walls like this out of these discarded stones that have been pushed as the Ice Age glaciers came through, that are actually made from all these ancient pieces that were laid down a long time ago and rose up. And we're all the product of all this ancient biology and ancient psychology. And what can we make of that in ourselves through that soul retrieval, through that just acceptance that these are pockets of little experience and feeling that kept fracturing our little psyches into pieces that we just left behind as we tried to belong to the unfolding, the urgency of the unfolding moment all the time. There's a poem by David White I want to read to you. He read it to us on the first night, and the place that we read it from was called Tober Fordrick, which Tober means well, and Fordrick is the name for Podrick or Patrick. So it's the well of St. Patrick. And it's actually an ancient place that people have been coming to since the time before Christ. And it's hugged up on the side of a mountain just outside the town that we were living in, maybe about 30 minutes drive. And here's David White standing on top of that place. There he is standing on top of, right here beside him. is this little shallow well, and you can see there's the limestone mountain going up behind him. Now, this well is arranged in three parts. There's the sacred well, spring that comes straight from the mountain from source. And then just below that, there's a drinking fountain. So they separate out their bodily nourishment from their spiritual nourishment. And then below that again is the animal trough where you water your animals. And so that already then they had the presence of mind that you don't lead cattle to the well. You it's there's you separate the animal from the child from the it's all separated out. There's a place and a way of nourishment, separate way of nourishment. And he's basically on his left. The sun is setting over the Atlantic, over Galway Bay, and he's facing out over this landscape. Isn't that incredible? And so this is a green road or a famine road, and there'd be a wall here before the pastures below, and there'd be a wall behind him that you have to see here. Is it here? Is it here? Yes, here is a wall leading back. This wall stops, and this is the green pastures down the hill to the bay, and here's another wall leading up into the mountain. So there he is. On this, the road is on the left, and there's the wall, and he's looking down over the bay. And here he is at top of Fordrick. And the poem is about the feeling of this special place and walking up the road to come to the little narrow stile that you pass over to get into this place. Turn sideways into the light, as they say, the old ones did, and disappear into the originality of it all. Be impatient with easy explanations, and teach that part of the mind that wants to know everything, not to begin questions it cannot answer. Walk the green road above the bay and the low glinting fields towards the evening sun. Let the Atlantic gleam be ahead of you and the grey light of the bay below you until you catch, down on your left, the break in the wall, the invitation, in other words. Until you catch, down on your left, the break in the wall. For just above, in the shadows, you'll find it hidden. A curved arm of rock holding the water close to the mountain. A just lit surface, smoothing a scattering of coins. What are our coins? They are the wishes, the child wishes, the deep wishes, the honest wishes that we tokenize with coins, little pieces of value, coins, money, little packets of life energy that we throw into the well to wish for. Walk the green road above the bay and the low glinting fields towards the evening sun. Let that Atlantic gleam be ahead of you and the grey light of the bay below you until you catch, down on your left, the break in the wall. For just above in the shadows, you'll find it hidden, a curved arm of rock, holding the water close to the mountain, holding the source of nourishment and replenishment close to this ancient upheaval. Holding the water close to the mountain, a just lit surface, just below our consciousness, just below the conscious thinking, busy, fretting mind. A just lit surface, smoothing a scattering of coins, and in the niche above, notes to the dead and supplications for those who still live. So people come with little parcels, little folded bits of paper, and they come and pray there in the old ways. And they put little blessings and little wishes also into the crevices of the rock, and they put coins into the well. A curved arm of rock holding the water close to the mountain, a just-lit surface smoothing a scattering of coins, and in the niche above, notes to the dead and supplications for those who still live. But for now, you are alone with the transfiguration, and ask no healing for your own. Ask no healing for your own. But look down as if looking through time, as if through a rent veil from the other side of the question you've refused to ask. But for now, you are alone with the transfiguration, and ask no healing for your own, but look down as if through time, as if through a rent veil from the other side of the question you've refused to ask. And remember now that clear stream of generosity from which you drank, how as a child your arms could rise and your palms turn out to take the blessing of the world. Just like that. And the invitation for all of us now is to ask ourselves how we can drink again from a deeper well. Does anyone have anything to share about who you were 7 years ago and what you expected of yourself and how surprised that person might be about who you've become today? And it's not mandatory. We can just sit here in silence if you want. But if you've taken nourishment and solace from the way that we've sat together today, then I think twice a month, maybe in winter and in summer, we should just have these kind of sessions instead of lessons. I think we should tone the lessons back, and we should just find ways to reinitiate ourselves back into the unfolding seasons of life again and again and again and again. Just open ourselves again and be welcomed back into the conversation. You know, there's 13, 14, 15 lessons there already. We've covered so much about how the human mind works, how the human body works, sleep, cycles, seasons, inner child work, predictive models, understanding, learning, unlearning, letting go, all of that. And sometimes we just need to find the tiny gap in the wall and come into this overgrown place where the well is nearly invisible, and just sit and let the broken heart of the unhealed heart of that place, of ourselves, just speak whatever comes out of the well. And we're all sitting with broken hearts. It's the nature of a life. You have this thing that you want to do in the world, and you have this inability or this obstacle that you are living with. And it's always the two opposite things. This opposite thing is always stopping the climb or the achievement. And we've lived with this wound forever. And the wound is not the limitation or the ask. Our lives seem to be asking something of us that we want to lean into And yet we're living with a limitation that is exactly in the way of answering that ask. Always. How is it that I know this? And how is it that this is true in every single one of us? I've never met a person that is really troubled that doesn't have this playing out inside of them. I've never met them. And I came to realize that we all, like the pillars of the temple, we all have this, just like this well, just like this. On the one hand of the road, there's a wall on either side, and there's this enormous vista of sunset and green pastures and a river inlet and the Galway Bay, and it's expansive. And on the other side is this invisible, narrowing invitation to this sacred well. And which way I'm pulled in two opposite directions. I want to come to stillness, but then there's the invitation out there. But I want to lean into that invitation, but there's the thing behind me, and I don't know which way to turn. I want to take this magic and this understanding inside of me, and I want to spread it out into the world so there can be less pain and less suffering and less discomfort. But for some reason, I'm blocked in doing that. And it's the tension that makes it feel like a wound. It's not the invitation or the limitation. It's the meeting of those two exactly in my heart that I live with day in and day out. And yet, I know now that tension, the secret aim of all tension, is transformation. It is exactly that tension. It's exactly that wound, and how I can love into that wound and accept the impossibility of those two opposite things inside myself. That allows me to process shadow, allows me to welcome myself home, allows me to be not so certain, to disappear again, sideways into the light. So I can come to these deeper wells of nourishment and replenishment and understanding and rewilding. And if it's true for me, and it's that true for me, it must be that true for you. It must be. Nice deep breath in and out. That big sigh of release is the body's way of saying, Amen, let it be. It's how we integrate to this moment. It's accepting and letting go. That's it for today. So I send you away with this invitation to reflect on what you from 7 years ago would have thought about your life now and yourself now and your identity and what it had to give up to get here and how disappointed or impressed it might be and how much it can teach us about how far we've come and who we thought we wanted to become. I leave you with a reminder about this idea of rewilding, letting things alone from time to time. Nature knows best by not knowing it all. And this idea of winterage, a place that we can let rewild and become full of nourishment and power again, that we can herd ourselves into, unwilling even, to take that deep nourishment, to strengthen our bones again. Because it's not through a way of being that we belong to the world. It's our openness to the invitation of the seasonality of everything. And the willingness to die to who we were a minute ago so that we can keep getting welcomed back to this deeper well of nourishment and reflection and replenishment. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your love. Thank you for coming here. I know in my heart this is something that we all needed, and I think we need a lot more of it. And it's so simple, actually. I haven't prepared anything, not a single slide, because I am a field of preparation, as are you.
Thank you, Rocco.
You are most welcome. You are most welcome.
Actually, if I may, I kind of want to share a couple thoughts on that, your question.
We'd love to hear
The
it.
year 2016 was not a very good year for me. My brother had discovered he had cancer. I had to suddenly move apartments, and very traumatic experience happened with my best friend. So a lot of things happened at once. I had very severe anxiety, as well as a lot of stress. 2016 was not good for a lot of other people that I know as well. So
difficult
the Jen back then was strung out and just didn't know up from down some days. But I had to find that deeper well of inner strength that I didn't even know I had, because I'd never been tested to that extreme with all kinds of things at once. And I was 36, I'm currently 44. So yeah, I had tended to have a little bit of a shorter fuse. I'd get, angry and upset. I had the anxiety, the stress. I'd get triggered by stuff. But with especially what happened with my best friend, who's like a sister to me, I had to calm myself down, be strong for myself, for my family as we were going through my brother's cancer diagnosis. Actually, today marks 2 years since he passed. And trying to help my best friend through her own trauma and come back to herself. I've learned a lot in the past 7 years.
Yeah.
I've dealt with a lot of inner work, some shadow work. So the Jen hug from 2016, I think, would be proud of what I've become so now.
And awestruck by the strength and the resilience and the depth.
Yes. So as soon as you said that number 2016, I'm like, oh.
Yeah, man.
Let me tell you some things.
We're on year 7 now, and we move in 9-year cycles, and which means I've got 2 years left. This is the wind down. This is the autumn. We should be harvesting. This is what the soul retrieval is all about. It's about looking at that in a very different way, not in a way about did I do right or did I do wrong? Wrong question. How can I welcome all of that home now? How can I harvest this back into myself, gather it to myself? How can I gather myself to myself? And 7 years ago was a very difficult time for a lot of people. And yet, it's such a hard thing to face and to say, what is this hardest experience that I've had in my life that I wouldn't wish to repeat, but I'm actually grateful in some ways that it happened because of who I could become because of it.
Yes.
And when that gratitude arrives, and that understanding, actually, it is really the moment where you change your relationship with suffering and with discomfort, because you suddenly realize how intimate you were with life, and that the battles were not there to defeat you. They were actually there to temper you, to thresh away the husk of everything that you were not, that life had made of you. so that you could step through into a moment that is still coming. Your life was preparing you for the discomfort that is yet to come, that will prepare you for the discomfort which is yet to come, that you will keep looking back on every stage of the hike and every season and go, wow, wow. But it cannot always be hardship and growth. It has to also be celebration. It has to also be acknowledgement. It has to also be coming to stillness, rewilding, disappearance. And what we're actually learning, is grace. Grace. And the truth that we were always held in grace, even when it feels like we were not. We were actually deeply held in grace. And at those times when we felt most alone, there is a magic way, actually, we can reach back and hold that version of ourselves and say, I'm so proud of you. I'm so incredibly proud of you that you were able to find a way. You were more marvelous in your simple wish to find a way than the gilded roofs of any destination you might have hoped to reach. And this is a pilgrimage. And we are looking for meaning in front of us. And we laugh. And you look back, now you realize the meaning. Now you realize it. Every time I feel a moment or I witness something difficult, I hear a story, I do that. And it's my way of stepping into the moment and allowing and integrating and saying, amen, so be it. So be it. This is part of my story now. You are all part of my story now. You are all part of my journey. Story of Rocco all involves all of you and your story now. And your story is now part of our story collectively. And in community like this, we can start building this rich thatch of meaning and of belonging and of understanding and of compassion and of generosity. And we haven't felt this nourished in months. What an investment. What an investment. All right, beautiful people. Thank you so much for your time. I'm going to get going. I'll put this video up later. And I'll probably do the midweek session back to back. And then I'll put some announcement out there, maybe via email. I'll just let people know that we're going to change things up. Mark, you were very quiet, but I think you drank from that deeper well. So I'm assuming I got a thumbs up from you. Angie, I know I got a thumbs up from you. Jeff, I know I got a thumbs up from you. And I know from Sasha's body language, I got a thumbs up from Sasha. And I definitely know from my wife, this is what she's been wanting me to do for a very long time. Stop teaching. Stop the show.
So, sorry, I was a few minutes late. I'll have to go
watch
the video, release it.
You didn't miss much. Okay.
I didn't miss much.
You can catch it on the video, yeah. All right. I love you all. Take care. Have a beautiful week and allow some rewilding in yourself now. Go write your grief backlogs. Go write them down. Go figure out the bits of soul retrieval that are speaking to you from beyond that veil. Go bring them home. Talk to you later. Take care.
Bye-bye. See you.